Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine lying alone in a hospital bed, every breath, a battle, every heartbeat, a whisper of vulnerability. You've just learned you nearly died, not from illness, but from an accident. Then imagine hearing the people who should love you most say, "Let her go. She's a burden. I'm Dr. Emilia Shaw, clinical psychologist, specializing in trauma identity and family betrayal. Today, we step into the story of Elizabeth Lizzie Taylor, not just to recount her ordeal, but to chart how such profound betrayal can fracture the self and yet spur a rebirth of agency. In this video, I'll take you deep into Lizzie's world through her trauma, her breathtaking defiance, and the psychological shifts that accompany betrayal by one's own blood. I'll be speaking in multiple voices. Lizzie reigniting her narrative, Thomas offering the voice of genuine attachment, Sophia embodying compassionate care, Rachel as the guardian of autonomy, and myself weaving them all with psychological insight. Let's ground ourselves in one enduring truth. Family is defined not by blood, but by who shows up to hold. Lizzie loved art from the time she could hold a crayon. While other kids were chasing each other in the yard, she sat cross-legged on the floor with sketchbooks spread around her like a battlefield. Colors were her soldier's imagination, her weapon. To her, drawing wasn't just a hobby, it was a way of surviving in a house where silence felt heavier than words. But her parents never saw it that way. At 6 years old, she proudly carried a painting of a bluebird to her father's office. The bird's wings were uneven, the stroke shaky, but Lizzie's heart was bursting with hope. She wanted Harold Taylor's approval. Instead, he barely glanced at it before muttering, "Cute doodle Lizzie. Don't get paint on the carpet." She remembered standing there, cheeks burning, as Ryan toddled in behind her with a messy stick figure scrawled in red marker. Their father's face lit up. "Look at that, Ryan. You're a natural. Let's frame this one and put it in the hallway." That single moment etched itself into Lizzie's memory like a scar. She realized early that in her home, her efforts would never be enough, not when compared to Ryan. Her mother wasn't any better. Judith's life revolved around appearances, perfect casseroles for church gatherings, neatly pressed linens, and polite conversations. When Lizzie brought home report cards with A-minuses, Judith would purse her lips as if Lizzie had committed a sin. "Elizabeth, why can't you be more like Ryan? He knows how to charm people. You're always lost in your head, lost in her head." That became her label. Not imaginative, not creative, just lost. And Judith never missed a chance to remind Lizzie of it. Family dinners were laced with subtle daggers. If Lizzie spoke passionately about a new artist she admired, her mother would sigh and pivot the conversation toward Ryan's latest achievements, even if they were as trivial as scoring a C+ in algebra. Ryan didn't just receive attention, he basked in it. He learned early how to weaponize his charm, flashing smiles at family friends, getting away with half-done chores, and thriving on constant validation. Whenever Lizzie tried to confront him about the unfairness, Ryan would shrug, grinning. "It's not my fault Mom and Dad like me better. Maybe if you weren't so weird with your drawing stuff, they'd like you too." Those words, cruel and careless, replayed in Lizzie's head during nights when she cried quietly under her blanket. She wanted to hate Ryan, but what burned worse was the gnawing thought that maybe he was right. Maybe she wasn't enough. To outsiders, the Taylors were untouchable. At church, Judith sat in the front row, Ryan by her side, while Lizzie fidgeted alone, the forgotten shadow. At neighborhood picnics, Harold bragged about Ryan's business sense, while Lizzie's sketches were reduced to polite chuckles. Neighbors saw the smiles, the polished lawn, the matching holiday outfits. They didn't see the way Lizzie's stomach twisted whenever her father introduced Ryan as his pride and joy while glossing over her entirely. They didn't see Judith's raised eyebrows at Lizzie's ink-stained hands, or hear the sharp sighs when she dared to talk about wanting to go to art school. The perfect family was a facade, a carefully constructed illusion. And Lizzie was the crack in the glass that no one wanted to acknowledge. By the time she was a teenager, Lizzie had built a private world where art was her escape. She stayed late at school in the art room sketching until janitors turned off the lights. She poured her soul into colors and shapes, because that was where she felt seen by herself, if by no one else. Still, she longed for a sign of approval. She entered a state art competition at 16, pouring weeks into a portrait of her grandmother, Eleanor, the only person who ever encouraged her passion. When Lizzie won third place, she rushed home, certificate in hand, heart pounding with excitement. Her father looked at it for 2 seconds before setting it aside. "That's nice, Lizzie, but you know art isn't a career. You should start thinking about something practical, like business." Her mother didn't even look up from folding laundry. "Elizabeth, you need to learn how the world works. Do you think doodling will pay bills?" Ryan smirked from the couch, tossing popcorn into his mouth. "Guess you'll be the starving artist type, huh?" That night, Lizzie tore the certificate into pieces and stuffed them into the trash. But even as tears stung her eyes, a different fire began to burn inside her. Senior year of high school, Lizzie got her acceptance letter to the Chicago Art Institute. It should have been one of the happiest days of her life. She clutched the letter, trembling, running down the stairs to show her parents. Judith's smile was tight-forced. "That's something, Elizabeth? But don't you think business school would be wiser?" Her father's voice was harsher. "Art isn't a real career. You'll waste your potential. I built this family on hard work and insurance, not paintbrushes. If you go down this path, don't expect us to support you." Ryan, then 12, chimed in with mock innocence. "So you're gonna live in an alley and paint walls like those homeless people downtown?" That was the moment, the final crack in the facade. Lizzie's hands shook, but her voice was steady. "Then I'll go on my own. I don't need your approval." She packed 2 suitcases that night, while her parents watched with disapproval and Ryan sneered. Lizzie walked out the front door, her heart pounding not just with fear, but with determination. What we see here is not just sibling rivalry or parental pressure, it's the blueprint of toxic family dynamics. When one child becomes the golden child and another the scapegoat, the emotional environment becomes suffocating. Lizzie's journey in this chapter is about awakening, recognizing the illusion of a perfect family, and daring to break free. Psychologically, this moment is monumental. The decision to leave is not only about chasing a dream, it's about self-preservation. When parents repeatedly dismiss a child's worth, that child learns either to shrink or to fight for her voice. Lizzie chose the latter. As the bus pulled away from Maplewood the next morning, Lizzie pressed her forehead against the window. Her hometown blurred into gray streaks, her parents' house shrinking in the distance. She thought of the framed stick figures on the hallway wall, of the cold glances, the endless comparisons. She whispered to herself, "I will prove them wrong. I will prove that I am not invisible." And though fear churned in her stomach, determination burned brighter. For the first time, Lizzie felt the illusion shatter, leaving behind not emptiness, but the possibility of becoming herself. The first years away from Maplewood were brutal. Lizzie arrived in Chicago with nothing but 2 suitcases, a small scholarship, and the stubborn fire of someone who had been told her whole life that she wasn't enough. The city was merciless, its winters sharp as knives, its rent unforgiving, its people rushing past with headphones plugged in, as if no one had time to notice a girl sketching alone in a dorm hallway. She worked every job she could get her hands on. Mornings began with slinging coffee at a cafe downtown. Afternoons were spent shelving books in the university library, and nights often stretched until dawn as she balanced classes and freelance design work for anyone willing to pay $20 for a flyer or a logo. Ramen became her staple. Her fingers were always ink-stained, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. But every time doubt crept in, she would remember her father's voice. Art isn't a real career. And with gritted teeth, she swore to prove him wrong. 4 years later, degree in hand, Lizzie wasn't just surviving, she was clawing her way into thriving. She rented a tiny drafty studio above a laundromat in Detroit and hung a cardboard sign on the door, Elizabeth Taylor Design. At first, clients trickled in slowly, mostly small businesses needing logos or posters. But Lizzie treated every project like it was a masterpiece. She pulled all-nighters, perfecting fonts, colors, and layouts until they gleamed with professionalism. Word of mouth spread. Soon cafes, boutiques, and even regional brands started calling her. By the time she was 26, Lizzie had hired 3 junior designers, moved into a sunlit loft downtown, and was working with national accounts. Her name was whispered in design circles as someone to watch. But no matter how many contracts she landed, or how many awards she won, her victories always felt muted by the absence of the one thing she had always craved: recognition from her family. That winter, she returned to Maplewood for Christmas. The Taylor house looked the same, glowing wreath on the door, pine-scented candles burning in the windows. Inside, Judith fussed over Ryan's favorite dish, Harold poured him a glass of wine, and Lizzie's arrival felt like an afterthought. When Lizzie proudly mentioned her studio's recent campaign for a national clothing brand, her father barely looked up. "That's nice," Harold muttered, adjusting his tie. "But businesses fail all the time. You should think about something more stable." Her mother chimed in with a pointed smile. "Your cousin Sarah just had her second baby? You're almost 30, Elizabeth. Don't you think it's time you settled down?" Ryan, lounging on the couch, smirked. "Yeah, Liz, not everyone wants a starving artist at the dinner table." The room erupted in laughter, everyone except Lizzie. She forced a smile, but inside the old wound reopened. She had built a thriving studio-employed staff and landed national clients, and still in their eyes, she was nothing compared to Ryan. The day after Christmas, seeking relief from the suffocating air of her parents' home, Lizzie ducked into a small coffee shop near the town square. She ordered her drink and buried herself in sketches, headphones drowning out the chatter around her. That's when a voice broke through. "Those are incredible. Did you design them?" Lizzie looked up to see a tall man with kind eyes and a warm smile. His name was Thomas Cooper, an engineer who had also grown up in Maplewood, but moved away years earlier for work. Unlike everyone else back home, Thomas didn't dismiss her art. He leaned in, genuinely curious. "Walk me through this design," he asked, pointing at a draft logo. "Why did you choose these colors?" No one, not even her family, had ever asked her that. For the first time in years, Lizzie felt truly seen. Their connection grew quickly. Long-distance calls stretched late into the night. When Lizzie spoke about her projects, Thomas didn't just nod. He asked questions, celebrated her milestones, and encouraged her through failures. "Anyone can sell insurance," Thomas once said after meeting her parents. "But what you create, that's rare. Don't let them convince you otherwise." Lizzie had heard similar compliments before from clients, but hearing it from Thomas was different. His voice carried no agenda, no condescension, only genuine admiration. For a woman who had been raised in a house where love was conditional, Thomas's acceptance was revolutionary. Meanwhile, Ryan was thriving, or at least that's how it looked from the outside. He was in college studying business, just as Harold had always wanted. Every phone call home revolved around his progress, the professors who praised him, the internships lined up the bright future ahead. At family gatherings, Ryan's name was spoken with pride, his smallest achievements magnified into greatness. Lizzie's studio, despite its growing success, was treated as a temporary phase. "Elizabeth, you should really consider working with your brother when he graduates," her father suggested one evening. "He'll need someone creative in his business." The implication stung, no matter how far she had come in their eyes. She would always be Ryan's assistant, never her own person. But in Thomas, Lizzie found an anchor. He was steady where her parents were fickle, affirming where they were dismissive. He didn't try to change her, he celebrated her. When her studio hit its first major crisis, a client threatening to pull a contract due to a misprint, Lizzie panicked. She called Thomas in tears, convinced she had failed. Instead of offering hollow reassurance, he calmly helped her map out a plan step by step. By morning, the crisis was contained. "See," he said, brushing her tears away. "You don't crumble. You adapt. That's what makes you unstoppable." Yet, even with Thomas by her side, Lizzie couldn't fully silence the old voices in her head. Every time she achieved something, she heard her father's skepticism, her mother's sighs, Ryan's mocking laughter. Success never felt like enough because the people she had once wanted it from most refused to acknowledge it. That unhealed wound would haunt her for years and eventually set the stage for the betrayal that would change everything. Lizzie's journey in this chapter isn't just about career growth or falling in love. It's about learning what validation feels like outside of toxic family dynamics. Her parents conditioned her to believe her worth depended on their approval. But in Thomas, she discovered what psychologists call earned secure attachment, a relationship built not on fear or performance, but on mutual respect and unconditional support. This kind of relationship is transformative. It doesn't erase the wounds of childhood, but it begins to heal them. Yet the parallel reality remains: Lizzie's family still worshipped Ryan, and that wound was never closed. Instead, it lay dormant, waiting for the moment when wealth, inheritance, and betrayal would rip it open again. One evening, after a long day at her studio, Lizzie sat with Thomas at the lakeside cottage her grandmother once showed her. The moonlight shimmered on the water as Thomas squeezed her hand. "You don't see it, Liz," he whispered, "but you've already proven them wrong. You don't need their approval. You've built something they'll never understand." Lizzie looked out at the reflection of the stars, her heart both heavy and hopeful. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that success, love, and recognition could be enough. But deep inside, she knew, until her family saw her for who she truly was, the shadows of the past would never fully let go. Eleanor Taylor was nothing like the rest of the family. Where Harold and Judith measured life in reputation, appearances, and dollar signs, Eleanor measured it in brushstrokes, laughter, and moments of wonder. She was Lizzie's grandmother, her quiet savior. From childhood, Eleanor had been Lizzie's secret refuge. She was the one who slipped sketchbooks into Lizzie's backpack, whispering, "Don't ever let them tell you art isn't real. Art is the heartbeat of the soul." She was the one who transformed a dusty basement corner into a makeshift studio, an easel, a second-hand lamp, jars of brushes lined neatly like soldiers ready for battle. While her parents rolled their eyes, Eleanor would lean down her hands speckled with age spots and say, "You have a gift, Lizzie. And gifts must be protected, even when others don't see their value." But time is cruel, and by the time Lizzie was 27, Eleanor's body began to betray her spirit. The once energetic woman who had traveled through Europe in her youth now struggled to climb the stairs. Cancer spread quietly like a thief in the night, and within months, the vibrant light of Eleanor dimmed. Lizzie spent every spare moment at her grandmother's side. She sketched, while Eleanor dozed, filling page after page with portraits of the woman who had given her courage. On one particularly fragile evening, Eleanor clasped Lizzie's hand and whispered, "Promise me you won't let them dim you. Promise me you'll keep creating even when I'm gone." Lizzie promised through tears. When Eleanor passed, the world felt colder. At the funeral, neighbors whispered about how tragic it was, but in the Taylor household, grief was smothered by tension. Judith's eyes were dry. Harold's jaw was set. Ryan checked his phone in the pews, restless. Only Lizzie wept, clutching the folded program like it was the last tangible piece of her grandmother's love. A week later, the family gathered in the oak-paneled office of Eleanor's longtime attorney, Rachel Goldstein. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence heavy enough to choke on. Lizzie sat quietly, still fragile from grief, while her parents and brother fidgeted with barely concealed impatience. Rachel unfolded the will, her voice steady, professional. To my beloved granddaughter Elizabeth, who carries the fire of creation within her, I leave the sum of my savings and the cottage by the lake. I know she will use these gifts to nurture her art and honor the love we shared. To my son Harold, my daughter-in-law Judith, and my grandson Ryan, I leave smaller bequests with the hope that they will find fulfillment in their own paths. The words seemed to echo in the still room, each syllable landing like a stone in water. Lizzie's breath caught. She hadn't expected this, hadn't dared. The cottage, the savings, it was everything Eleanor had ever cherished, everything tied to the world they had built together. Tears welled in her eyes as Rachel continued reading Eleanor's personal letter addressed to Lizzie. You are the one who listened, who saw the world as I did. You are my legacy. Never doubt that. The silence shattered. Harold's face flushed crimson veins bulging at his temple. This is outrageous. That cottage has been in the family for generations. It doesn't belong to her alone. Judith's lips tightened into a bitter slash. Mother wasn't in her right mind. Elizabeth must have manipulated her. How else could she leave everything to a girl who wastes her life on drawings? Ryan slammed his fist against the table. This is ridiculous. I'm her grandson too. Why should Lizzie get everything while I get crumbs? Lizzie sat frozen, heart pounding. She wanted to defend herself, but Rachel interjected firmly. Eleanor's will is legally binding. Her mental capacity was thoroughly documented. There is no question of manipulation. Her father turned on Lizzie, his eyes sharp as knives. So this is your plan to rob us of what's rightfully ours, to pit yourself against your family. Lizzie's voice trembled but held steady. I didn't ask for this. Grandma chose. She believed in me when no one else did. Her mother scoffed. She was blinded by sentiment. You're not family material, Elizabeth. You'll never carry the Taylor name forward. You'll never give us grandchildren. You'll squander it all. Ryan leaned closer, his tone dripping with venom. You think this makes you special? You're still the same weird, self-absorbed girl? You'll fail like you always do. The meeting ended in chaos. Papers shuffled chairs, screeched accusations flew. But beneath it all, something deeper cracked. Whatever fragile thread still tied Lizzie to her family snapped in two. Driving home that night, she clutched Eleanor's letter to her chest, tears blurring the road. For the first time in her life, someone had openly chosen her over the rest of them. It was validation, but also a burden. She could almost hear Eleanor's voice. You are my legacy. And with that legacy came the fury of her parents and brother. Weeks later, Lizzie visited the cottage. Nestled among towering pines overlooking the still waters of Lake Huron, it was a sanctuary. The air smelled of cedar and wildflowers, the same scents of her childhood summers spent painting beside Eleanor. The art studio, dusty but intact, still held her grandmother's easel. Lizzie ran her fingers across the worn wood, a lump forming in her throat. This is mine now, yours and mine. For the first time, she felt grounded not in her parents' cold house, not in the city's chaos, but here, where art and love lived. She decided then the cottage wouldn't just be a retreat, it would be her promise fulfilled. She would renovate it, preserve the gardens, and keep the studio alive. This wasn't just inheritance, it was a declaration of faith, one final gift from the woman who had believed in her. Back in Maplewood, however, resentment festered. At family dinners, her parents couldn't hide their bitterness. Harold pressed, "You should at least consider letting me manage the savings. Investments are risky, especially for someone inexperienced like you." Judith hissed, "The cottage isn't just yours. It should stay in the family name. Ryan would take good care of it." Ryan didn't even hide his anger. "One day you'll regret this, Lizzie. You can't carry this weight on your own." Their words weren't pleas, they were threats dressed in family clothing. Lizzie left those dinners hollow and trembling, Thomas's steady hand, the only thing keeping her from collapsing under the weight of their scorn. Inheritance isn't just about money or property, it's about validation power and family dynamics. Eleanor's choice wasn't financial, it was emotional. She chose Lizzie not because she was the eldest or the neediest, but because she saw her. She recognized her worth. For parents who had dismissed Lizzie all her life, this was a devastating blow to their narrative. In toxic families, favoritism is currency, and Eleanor had just cashed it all in on Lizzie. The result, rage envy accusations. Instead of celebrating Eleanor's life, the Taylors turned her legacy into a battlefield. On a quiet night at the cottage, Lizzie sat by the lake with Thomas. The moon rippled across the dark water. She unfolded Eleanor's letter again, tracing the familiar handwriting. "You are my legacy." Her parents' fury echoed in her head, but Eleanor's voice was louder. Lizzie whispered into the night, "I won't let you down, Grandma. I'll honor this, even if it means standing alone." The lake reflected her tears, but also her resolve. This was no longer just about art. It was about survival, about proving she could carry the inheritance of love in the face of a family consumed by greed. The road to the cottage was slick with rain, the kind that made every surface gleam like black glass. Lizzie and Thomas had been silent for most of the drive, each lost in thought. For Lizzie, the cottage represented sanctuary, her grandmother's spirit, her inheritance, her final proof that she had been chosen for something more than rejection. For Thomas, it was a test. Could this place finally heal the wounds her parents left behind? The rain hammered against the windshield wipers, swiping furiously when headlights suddenly appeared in their lane. "Thomas, watch out," Lizzie screamed. The world spun. Tires screeched, metal crunched, glass shattered like ice. The car jolted, then darkness swallowed her. When Lizzie's eyes fluttered open, she was drowning in harsh fluorescent light. Every breath stabbed her ribs like knives. Tubes dug into her arm wires, snaked across her chest. Machines beeped in an unfeeling rhythm. Confusion gave way to pain. Her right leg throbbed violently, her chest burned, and her head pulsed as though it were splitting in half. She tried to speak, but only a hoarse croak escaped. A nurse appeared, a woman with warm brown eyes and a calm smile. "Don't try to move, honey. You're safe. I'm Sophia. You've been in an accident." Through cracked lips, Lizzie whispered Thomas. Sophia nodded. "He's alive. A concussion and a broken arm, but he's stable. You got the worst of it, sweetheart." Relief and pain washed over Lizzie in equal measure. Later that night, drifting between consciousness and sleep, Lizzie heard voices through the haze. She recognized them instantly. Her parents. Her heart leapt, maybe they had come for her. But then came her father's voice, cold, sharp, and calculating. "She has significant injuries. The leg will need surgeries, the head injury. Well, it could mean permanent damage. She'll need long-term care." The doctor's tone was calm, clinical. With proper treatment, there's every chance she'll recover. It will take time, but she's young and strong. Silence. Then Judith's voice tight with disdain. And if she doesn't recover? If she can't work again? What happens then? The doctor hesitated. It's too soon to assume the worst. Right now, she needs support. But Harold cut in his words, colder than the rain-soaked night that had almost killed her. You have to understand our position. Elizabeth has always been difficult, independent to a fault. If she can't recover, she'll be a burden. A burden to everyone, especially herself. Maybe it's better to let her go. And then Judith, echoing him like a cruel chorus. She is just a burden. Let her go. Lizzie wanted to scream, to rip the tubes out and demand how they could say such things, but her body refused to move, her mouth locked by weakness. All she could do was lie there, her heart breaking with every word. The people who had given her life were now bargaining with it like it was an insurance claim. And behind their voices was another shadow, Ryan. With the inheritance she got from Mother, Harold muttered, "There are financial considerations. If she can't manage her affairs, the money shouldn't just sit there. We could use it for the family." The doctor's voice turned icy. "Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, you are not her medical proxies. Unless her condition deteriorates, this conversation is irrelevant." But Judith persisted. "Just keep us informed. If things look bad, no extraordinary measures." Their footsteps faded. They hadn't even entered her room. Tears welled in Lizzie's half-shut eyes. She had believed deep down that despite all the coldness, her parents would never abandon her when her life hung by a thread. But they had. Worse, they had weighed her survival against money, and money had won. The next morning, Sophia returned with her usual gentle smile, but Lizzie couldn't hold it in. "I heard them," she whispered, her voice breaking. Sophia's brow furrowed. "Who, my parents? They told the doctor to let me die." For a moment, Sophia's calm cracked. Her eyes flashed with anger. "Some people should never be parents," she muttered. Then she softened, squeezing Lizzie's hand. "But you're still here, and you get to decide what family means from now on." When Thomas was finally allowed to visit his arm in a cast, he nearly broke down at the sight of her. "You scared me half to death," he whispered, kneeling beside her bed. Lizzie told him everything, the voices, the words, the betrayal. His gentle face hardened with fury. "Those monsters," he hissed. "Lizzie, I'm so sorry. No one should ever hear that from their own parents." She looked at him through tears. "Don't tell them I know. Not yet." Thomas nodded, but his jaw was tight. She could see the rage simmering in him, not for himself, but for her. This was more than abandonment. What Lizzie experienced was what psychologists call moral injury, the shattering of a core belief about the people who should have protected her. When family betrayal cuts this deep, it doesn't just wound the heart. It fractures the foundation of trust in humanity itself. Days blurred into nights. Lizzie's legs screamed with every attempt at movement. Her chest ached, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the echo in her mind. "She's just a burden. Let her go." Every time the memory replayed, it was like being struck again. She felt like a ghost in her own life present, but already discarded. Thomas stayed by her side, sleeping in chairs, holding her hand when nightmares jolted her awake. Sophia snuck in extra pudding cups, whispered encouragement, and reminded her that survival itself was an act of defiance. But deep inside, Lizzie's heart had turned to stone. The illusion of family was gone. All that remained was the truth she had no parents, no brother, only people who saw her life as expendable. One evening, while the machines beeped steadily beside her, Lizzie whispered to herself, barely audible, I will not be their burden. I will be their reckoning. The accident had broken her body, but their betrayal had awakened something stronger, something sharper. Her grandmother's words came back like a beacon. You are my legacy. Lizzie closed her eyes and let the tears fall. The battle ahead would not just be for her recovery, it would be for her freedom, her dignity, and her right to define her own worth. Outside her hospital window, rain streaked the glass, blurring the city lights into rivers of silver. Inside, Lizzie lay bruised, broken, but alive. Her parents thought she would fade quietly, her inheritance theirs for the taking. But as the storm raged outside, a new storm brewed inside her, determination cold and fierce. This was no longer just survival. This was war. The days after the accident were a blur of pain and fragile victories. Lizzie's body was stitched back together with metal rod scars and endless therapy sessions. But the deeper wounds weren't on her leg or ribs, they were lodged in her heart. Every night when the hospital lights dimmed, she would hear their voices echo again. She is just a burden. Let her go. The betrayal of her parents clung to her like smoke that refused to clear. Yet she wasn't alone. Sophia, the nurse with kind eyes, became more than a caretaker. She became Lizzie's lifeline. Every shift she would slip into the room, offering not only medicine, but encouragement. Your body heals slower when your spirit gives up, Sophia would whisper as she adjusted Lizzie's IV. But I see fire in you. Don't let their words snuff it out. She brought her extra pudding cups, played soft jazz on her phone to drown out the hospital beeping, and sometimes simply sat in silence, a presence that reminded Lizzie she mattered. Thomas, with his broken arm still in a sling, spent every possible hour by Lizzie's side. He read aloud her favorite books when she couldn't focus, held her hand through the grueling exercises, and never flinched at her tears. One night when the pain was too much, Lizzie broke down. Maybe they're right, she whispered through sobs. Maybe I am a burden now. Look at me, I can't even walk. Thomas gripped her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. Listen to me, Lizzie. You are not a burden. You are the strongest person I know. The only burden here is the poison your parents left in your head. And I swear I'll spend every day proving that wrong. Those words became her mantra. Rachel Goldstein. Eleanor's lawyer entered Lizzie's story like a blade of steel. Polished, sharp, unshakable. When Lizzie confided in her about overhearing her parents' conversation, Rachel's face darkened. They'll try to use your injuries against you, Rachel said flatly. They'll claim you're incapacitated, that you can't manage your inheritance. We're not going to let that happen. She laid out the plan with military precision. Secure new bank accounts, transfer assets, sell the cottage before anyone could contest and update Lizzie's will. You're competent, and we'll have medical documentation to prove it, but we don't wait for them to strike, we move first. Lizzie listened, torn between fear and resolve. She had never been one for confrontation. But this wasn't just about money, it was about survival. Part of her recovery involved weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Margaret Lewis, a trauma specialist. At first, Lizzie resisted. Talking about her parents felt like reopening a wound that hadn't even scabbed over. But Dr. Lewis's calm, steady voice coaxed her into the truth. You're mourning 2 losses, Dr. Lewis explained. The accident nearly took your life. But worse, you lost the illusion of family. That grief is real. Lizzie clenched her fists. They looked at me half dead and saw an inconvenience. A bank account, not a daughter. And what do you see when you look at yourself? Dr. Lewis asked. Silence stretched. Finally, Lizzie whispered, someone they underestimated. Someone who's still here. Physical therapy was brutal. Jasmine Winters, her therapist, was relentless. I don't want to hear, I can't. Jasmine snapped the first time Lizzie tried to stand. I only want to hear, not yet. Every attempt sent lightning bolts of pain through her leg, but with Thomas cheering, Sophia steadying her, and Jasmine demanding more, Lizzie pushed through. Each tiny victory a step with the walker, a lap across the room, wasn't just physical progress. It was proof she wasn't what her parents called her, a burden. But outside the hospital, the storm was gathering. Calls started coming in, her parents asking the staff when she would be discharged, inquiring about her ability to make decisions. Ryan sent smug messages. Hope you're doing okay. Dad says maybe you should let him handle things until you're back on your feet. Every word dripped with manipulation. Lizzie realized she didn't have the luxury of waiting. If she wanted to protect her grandmother's legacy, she had to act now. Late one night, she sat with Thomas and Rachel in her hospital room, papers spread across her tray table. The hum of machines filled the silence. I'm selling the cottage, Lizzie said suddenly. Her voice was steady, though her heart raced. Thomas blinked. Liz, that cottage is your safe place? Are you sure? She nodded. It was my grandmother's gift to me, not to them. They'll never stop clawing at it. I'd rather sell it to someone who loves it than let them destroy it. And with the money, I'll start something new. Something that honors her, not them. Rachel leaned in. What do you have in mind? Lizzie's lips trembled into a smile. A scholarship for art students who don't have anyone believing in them, like Grandma believed in me. For the first time since the accident, Lizzie felt light pierce the darkness. This wasn't just defense, it was transformation. The next week became a whirlwind. Rachel moved funds into new accounts under Lizzie's control. Thomas contacted a trusted real estate agent to handle the sale of the cottage quietly, swiftly. Sophia stayed late after shifts helping Lizzie sign documents when her hands shook too much from pain. Jasmine adjusted her therapy schedule so Lizzie could make legal meetings. They weren't just helping, they were forming her chosen family. And Lizzie, once the girl labeled lost in her head, was now orchestrating a counterattack with precision her parents could never have imagined. What Lizzie did here is what trauma psychologists call agency reclamation. When someone is stripped of power by abuse, by neglect, by betrayal, the path to healing often begins when they seize back control. By deciding to sell the cottage, move the assets, and create a scholarship, Lizzie wasn't just protecting her money. She was rewriting the narrative. She was not a victim of her parents' greed. She was the architect of her own future. One evening, Thomas wheeled her out to the hospital's rooftop garden. The city glowed beneath them, distant car horns blending into the hum of life. Lizzie clutched Eleanor's old scarf, the one she had taken from the cottage before the sale. I used to think survival meant proving myself to them, Lizzie whispered. But it doesn't. Survival means proving to myself that I'm more than their rejection, that I can turn their betrayal into something beautiful. Thomas kissed her temple. And you are. Lizzie closed her eyes, the city lights flickering like stars. For the first time, she felt not just alive, but powerful. The war with her family wasn't over. But now, Lizzie wasn't the broken girl in the hospital bed. She was the woman preparing her counterstrike. The knock on the door came exactly at 2:00. Thomas glanced at Lizzie, who sat in her wheelchair by the window, hands folded in her lap. Her face looked calm, almost too calm, but he could feel the tension vibrating in her shoulders. Ready? He asked softly. Lizzie drew a slow breath. Let's finish this. When Thomas opened the door, Harold and Judith Taylor walked in like they owned the place. Harold carried a sleek leather portfolio, the kind he used to take to client meetings. Judith clutched her purse against her chest, her lips pressed into a mask of motherly concern. Behind them trailed Ryan, tapping on his phone until Judith elbowed him. The room's air seemed to thicken. Elizabeth Judith exclaimed, forcing brightness into her voice. You look, well, so much better than we expected. Harold followed with a practiced smile. The hospital told us you were improving, but seeing you upright, well, this is a relief. Ryan finally looked up. So, when do you think you'll be walking again? His tone was casual, careless, as if she had sprained an ankle instead of nearly dying. Lizzie forced a weak smile, tilting her head slightly. It's been hard, but I'm getting there. The doctors say I'll make a full recovery with time. Judith's eyes darted to the pill bottles neatly lined up on the counter. Strong painkillers, she remarked, picking one up. These can cloud judgment, you know. Thomas stiffened, but Lizzie raised a hand ever so slightly, signaling him to let her play along. They didn't waste much time before Harold opened his portfolio. Papers slid across the table, like a magician revealing his trick. Elizabeth, he began smoothly. We've been thinking about what's best for you. These documents are temporary, just a simple power of attorney. Until you're fully recovered, we'll handle financial matters, pay your medical bills, keep things running smoothly. Judith added quickly. Of course we'd consult you about major decisions, sweetheart. This is just to take the burden off your shoulders. Ryan smirked, leaning forward. Dad already has great investment ideas for the cottage. Much better than letting it sit empty. Lizzie lowered her gaze, feigning hesitation. She let the silence stretch the weight of their anticipation growing. Then she whispered, I'll think about it. Their faces lit up with relief. Harold leaned forward eagerly. Good. We'll bring the final copies tomorrow and you can sign at your convenience. But Lizzie's eyes suddenly hardened. Her voice sharpened like glass. Before we go any further, I have one question. The room froze. Why, Lizzie said slowly, her voice trembling, but clear. Did you tell the doctor to let me die? Judith's fake smile collapsed. Harold's eyes narrowed. Ryan looked up startled. What are you talking about? Harold demanded, his voice clipped. Lizzie leaned forward in her chair. I heard you. You said I was a burden, that it would be better to let me go. And you talked about my inheritance. Judith sputtered her hands, twisting the strap of her purse. Elizabeth, you were unconscious. You must have imagined it. The medication, I wasn't imagining anything, Lizzie cut in, her voice rising. I was drifting in and out, but I heard every word. You wanted me gone so you could have what Grandma left me. Harold's jaw clenched. This is nonsense. We would never. Thomas stepped forward, pulling his phone from his pocket. Actually, he said coolly, you did. With a tap, the recording filled the room. Harold's voice cold and businesslike. If she needs long-term care, it would be a burden. Maybe it's better to let her go. Judith's voice followed, sharp and unmistakable. She is just a burden. Let her go! The words echoed, damning and undeniable. Judith sank into the couch, covering her face. Ryan's mouth dropped open, his phone forgotten in his lap. Harold's face turned crimson. You recorded us! Harold growled, his voice low with fury. Thomas's eyes didn't waver. No one believed Lizzie when she was a child. Not anymore. Now she has proof. Elizabeth Judith pleaded, tears streaking her mascara. We were upset. We didn't mean it. You can't hold that against us forever. Lizzie's eyes burned. Upset. You left me in a hospital bed fighting for my life and calculated what to do with my money. That's not a mistake. That's who you are. Harold slammed his fist on the table. What do you want from us, huh? Money, is this blackmail? Lizzie laughed bitterly. Money? You think I want anything from you? No. I just want you to know that I know exactly who you are now. She wheeled herself to the desk, pulled out a folder, and dropped it on top of Harold's papers. And as for the inheritance you're so desperate to control, it's gone. Harold snatched the folder, flipping through the documents. His hands shook as he read. The cottage sold, The funds transferred. The accounts closed. This is family property, he sputtered. No, Lizzie said coldly. It was Grandma's property, and she left it to me. I've already honored her by creating something meaningful with it. You'll never touch it. For once, Ryan looked pale, his arrogance faltering. Lizzie. I didn't know they said those things. I swear I didn't. Lizzie's eyes locked on his. But you were happy enough to benefit if I had died, weren't you? Don't pretend you're innocent. Ryan's mouth opened, then shut again. Silence hung heavy. Judith sobbed. Harold's fury boiled, but he could do nothing. The power had slipped from his hands, his portfolio meaningless now. You've destroyed this family, Harold spat. No, Lizzie replied calmly. You destroyed it the moment you chose greed over love. All I did was make sure you'll never hurt me again. Thomas stepped forward, his presence solid and unyielding. You need to leave. Now. Before I call security. For a moment, Harold looked as if he might fight, his face twisted with rage. But then he gathered his papers with shaking hands. Judith stumbled toward the door, still crying. Ryan lingered a moment longer, staring at Lizzie with something between regret and fear. Finally, he followed them out. The door shut. Silence settled. Lizzie's hands trembled on her lap, her body shaking with adrenaline. Thomas knelt beside her, cupping her face gently. You did it, he whispered. You faced them. Lizzie closed her eyes, letting out a shuddering breath. Relief, grief, anger all swirled together. But beneath it all, there was something new. Freedom. This confrontation wasn't just about inheritance. It was about reclaiming identity. By asking the question, why did you tell the doctor to let me die? Lizzie forced her parents to confront the truth they had hidden behind polite facades. By revealing the evidence, she flipped the power dynamic, no longer the silenced daughter, but the accuser. And by selling the assets, she severed the last chain they could use to control her. This was the turning point where Lizzie stopped surviving and started winning. Lizzie sat by the window that night, the city lights flickering below. The echoes of the confrontation still rang in her ears, but so did her grandmother's words. You are my legacy. Her parents had tried to reduce her to a burden, a bank account, a problem to erase. But tonight, she had proved them wrong. She wasn't their burden. She was their reckoning. And the war they had started, they had already lost. The plane descended into Seattle, beneath a sky streaked with gray clouds, the kind that promised rain, yet carried a strange sense of renewal. Lizzie pressed her forehead against the window, watching the shimmering waters of Puget Sound below. Each wave felt like a clean slate washing away the ashes of everything she had left behind. Beside her, Thomas squeezed her hand. His cast was gone, now replaced by a faint scar on his wrist. This is it, he whispered. Our new start. Lizzie nodded, but her chest tightened. Part of her still carried the hospital's sterile beeps, her parents' voices calling her a burden, the echoes of betrayal. Yet Seattle wasn't just geography. It was escape, rebirth, and the first step into a life she could finally call her own. Their new apartment overlooked the Sound, small, but filled with light. Thomas rearranged the furniture so her wheelchair could glide easily through. He installed grab bars, stocked the fridge with her favorite foods, and placed fresh flowers on the kitchen counter every week. Not much, he said when they first stepped in, but it's ours. For Lizzie, it was everything. Slowly, she restarted her design business, this time remotely. At first, she worried clients would disappear. But something surprising happened. Her story spread. People admired not just her work, but her resilience. Small businesses from Seattle began calling then larger companies. Within a year, she was managing a team of 5 designers, all working remotely across the country. Her grandmother's words came back like a mantra. You are my legacy. The cottage was gone, but its spirit, lived on. With Rachel's help, Lizzie established the Eleanor Taylor Foundation for Arts Education. Its mission to fund scholarships for underprivileged art students, the kind of dreamers who were told their passion wasn't practical. The first time she handed out a scholarship check, she fought tears. A young girl, barely 17, hugged her and whispered, "No one ever believed in me until now." Lizzie smiled, her voice trembling. "Then let this be your proof that you're worth believing in." In that moment, Lizzie felt Eleanor's presence, warm, proud, eternal. Sophia, the nurse who had once slipped pudding cups into Lizzie's hospital room, relocated to Seattle after receiving a position at the University of Washington Medical Center. Jasmine, her no-nonsense physical therapist, accepted a prestigious offer at a local rehabilitation clinic. It wasn't coincidence, it was loyalty. They had become her sisters, the family she chose. Every Sunday, they gathered around Lizzie and Thomas's small dining table. Sophia brought wine and stories from the hospital. Jasmine made her famous lasagna. Thomas lit candles by the window. They laughed until midnight, sometimes tearing up when memories of the past surfaced, but always leaving the table stronger. One evening, Sophia raised her glass. "Family isn't blood. It's who shows up when you're broken. And look at us, we showed up." Lizzie blinked back tears, realizing how true it was. Months later, when her studio was thriving and the foundation had funded its 5th scholarship, an email appeared in her inbox. The sender, Ryan Taylor. Her heart skipped. She hovered over the screen, debating whether to open it. Finally, curiosity won. "Lizzie," it began. "I don't know if you'll even read this. I've been trying to understand what happened. Mom and Dad keep saying you're confused, ungrateful. But I found the hospital records. I saw the doctor's notes. I can't believe they said those things. I knew they favored me, but I never imagined it was this bad. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I don't agree with what they did." Her hands trembled. For years, she had hated him, the golden boy who mocked her pain. And now, an apology. Genuine, maybe. Too late. Definitely. After a long night of pacing, Lizzie wrote back Ryan, "Thank you for your message. I'm healing, and I'm building a new life. I hope you build yours with more awareness than our parents ever taught us. Take care of yourself." Short, distant, final. When she clicked send, she felt neither rage nor relief, only clarity. One rainy night, Lizzie sat by the window watching droplets race down the glass. She thought about Maplewood, the framed stick figures on the hallway wall, her parents' cold smiles. She thought about the cottage now belonging to someone else. She thought about Ryan's email, and then she thought about Thomas humming softly in the kitchen. Sophia and Jasmine's laughter echoing from last Sunday. Her studio alive with creativity, the students clutching their scholarship checks. She realized something profound. Family wasn't about bloodlines or last names. Family was love in action. Family was who stood beside you when storms hit. Her parents had left her in the storm. Thomas, Sophia, Jasmine, they built her shelter. Psychologically, Lizzie's journey illustrates a vital truth. When betrayal shatters the foundation of blood ties, the human heart doesn't stop needing connection. It seeks new bonds. In trauma recovery, this is called chosen attachment. Survivors often rebuild their sense of family by surrounding themselves with those who demonstrate loyalty, empathy, and unconditional support. Lizzie didn't just survive her parents' betrayal, she redefined what family meant on her own terms. One evening, standing on the balcony of their Seattle apartment, Thomas wrapped his arms around her waist as the city lights shimmered across the water. "Do you ever regret cutting them off completely?" he asked softly. Lizzie considered. "I regret that they weren't the parents I needed them to be. But walking away, That was the first time I truly chose myself." She leaned against him, the rain-cleared air cool on her skin. Below, the water stretched wide and endless, like possibility itself. For the first time in her life, Lizzie felt free. Not because she had escaped her family's betrayal, but because she had built something greater in its place, a new beginning, with a new family, chosen by love, not blood. The apartment was quiet, the kind of stillness that comes only after years of storms. Outside, Seattle rain tapped lightly against the balcony glass, a gentle rhythm, like the world exhaling. Lizzie sat in her studio corner, wrapped in a blanket, eyes fixed on a single painting hung above her desk, the lighthouse in the storm, Eleanor's masterpiece. Her grandmother had called it resilience. The lighthouse stood tall in the painting waves, crashing violently against its stone base, thunderclouds swirling overhead. Yet the beam of light pierced through the chaos, unwavering, unbroken. For years, Lizzie had stared at that painting without fully understanding it. Tonight, she finally did. Her parents had promised love, but only when she fit their mold, only when she didn't embarrass the family with her art, only when she was useful. Their love had been conditional, transactional. Thomas, Sophia, Jasmine, they never promised anything. They showed up. Through blood, sweat, tears, they stayed. Lizzie whispered to herself as though speaking to the painting, "Real love isn't words. It's presence. It's showing up even when it's hard." She remembered Thomas's hand gripping hers through therapy. Sophia sneaking pudding into her hospital room, Jasmine refusing to let her quit even when every muscle screamed. Those weren't grand declarations. They were love in its purest form. The old Lizzie had believed blood was destiny. That family ties were unbreakable, that no matter how much they hurt her, her parents' approval was the prize she had to earn. But betrayal had stripped that illusion bare. Now, staring at the lighthouse, she understood blood can betray, but you still have the power to choose your family. Family wasn't the people who shared your DNA. Family was the ones who sat with you in the dark until the storm passed. And in that redefinition, Lizzie found freedom. The accident had taken so much: her health, her trust, her illusions. But in losing everything, she had found herself. She thought of the cottage, once her sanctuary, now sold to someone who cherished it. She thought of her inheritance, transformed into scholarships that carried Eleanor's spirit forward. She thought of her parents, still bitter, still trying to rewrite the story in their favor, and realized their voices no longer had power over her. Sometimes she murmured, eyes on the storm in the painting. You have to lose everything to discover what was yours all along. What she found wasn't money or approval. It was resilience. It was the light within her that had never gone out, no matter how fierce the waves. Lizzie turned slightly, as though addressing not just the painting, but anyone who might one day hear her story. "Maybe you're watching this, and you felt the same weight I carried," she said softly. "Maybe you've been told you're not enough, that you're a burden, that love must be earned by sacrificing who you are. I need you to know something that's a lie. Real love doesn't make you shrink, it lets you grow. Real family doesn't abandon you when you're broken, it builds you back up. And sometimes the bravest, hardest choice you'll ever make is to walk away." Her voice trembled, but she pressed on. "Blood is not destiny. You have the right to choose who deserves a place in your life. You have the right to build a new family, to start over, to protect your peace. And most of all, you have the right to choose yourself." The rain outside eased clouds, parting to reveal the faint shimmer of stars. In the painting, the lighthouse's beam cut through the storm. In the apartment, Lizzie's eyes glistened, reflecting that same light. She whispered, as though speaking both to Eleanor and to every broken piece of her younger self, "I am not a burden. I am resilience." She stood steady on her healing leg and walked to the balcony where Thomas waited with 2 steaming mugs of tea. Sophia and Jasmine would be arriving soon for their weekly dinner. Laughter and warmth awaited. Behind her, the lighthouse painting glowed faintly under the soft lamplight, a symbol not of survival, but of freedom. "If you take anything from my story," Lizzie's voiceover concluded, "let it be this dare to choose yourself. Dare to cut ties with what poisons you. Dare to believe that you are worthy of love not because of what you give, but because of who you are." Sometimes the family we're born into breaks us, but the family we choose can heal us. And you, yes, you watching this right now, deserve to be healed, to be loved, and to be free. The screen faded to black, leaving only the word resilience.